Hello, sixth graders. We are starting Unit 8, Shapes and Measurement, and our first lesson today is areas of parallelograms, triangles, and trapezoids. Okay, our first vocab word here that we need to have written down is area. This is the space inside of a shape. And then we have a parallelogram. That's a four-sided shape with two sets of parallel sides. We have the base and height, which is defined down here. The base is any side of the parallelogram, and then the height is the length of the segment that's perpendicular to that. So it always makes a 90-degree angle with the base. Now we're going to use this formula to find our area of a parallelogram, which means we're going to take the base times the height. And then the units, that's the way that we're going to measure the area. So if we're measuring it in centimeters or inches, those are our units. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. Let's find the area of these parallelograms. So again, we're going to write down our formula. Area equals base times height, and then we are going to plug in our information from there. Okay. The base, again, is one of the sides of our parallelogram, which in this case we're going to use the 13. And then the height is that part that's perpendicular to that, makes a 90-degree angle. So we're going to measure it by, or multiply it by 5.8. And when I go ahead and multiply those together, it would be 75 and 4/10. When we are labeling area, since we are taking centimeters times centimeters, that makes it centimeters squared. So area is always squared with that little 2. And in this case, we were using centimeters. Let's try it again on this one. So again, I'm going to write the formula down first and then plug in the information that we know from there. So the base and height always have to make a 90-degree angle. So I noticed that this side and this would be my base and height. This is extra information that's not necessary or needed. So I'm going to take 11 and I'm going to multiply it by 9, which is 99. And again, we're in inches, so it's going to be inches squared. Common area is to always make sure that you are using the base and the height, not one of the other sides. Now we are on to triangle, which is a three-sided shape, and our formula is going to be this: 1/2 times the base times the height, or you can also take the base times the height and divide it by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Just like with a parallelogram, the base and height are always perpendicular. They make a 90-degree angle. So when we're looking at our triangle, you are finding the two parts that make a 90-degree angle are perpendicular to each other. So I'm going to try it with two different formulas here for you. So the first one, I'm going to use the one that we first had, 1/2 times base times height. I always start by writing down the formula so that I can see that I'm using the correct one. And then all I have to do is plug stuff into the correct spots. So the base is this side of the triangle here. And again, the height makes a 90-degree angle to it, which is 6.5. Now, when I go on my calculator, I can either enter it as a fraction as 1/2, or remember that's also equal to 0.5. So you could use either one of those. So 1/2 times 10 times 6.5, and I got an area of 32.5. Our label is the same because we're taking meters and we're multiplying it by meters, which makes my label meters squared. Okay, another triangle here. This time I'm going to show base times height divide by 2, because again, dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Now I can plug in the information. So the base and height, here's my 90-degree angle, so I'm looking at the two numbers base and height. So 7.5, which instead of entering it as 7 1/2, I'm going to enter it as 7.5 times the height of 8, and then I'm going to take all of that and divide it by 2. So now I go to my calculator here, multiply them together, and then divide it by 2, and I end up with an area of 30. Our label this time for our units is inches squared. Last shape that we have is a trapezoid. Here's our formula that we're going to use: 1/2 times the height times, in parentheses, base 1 plus base 2. That's what those B's mean. The bases are the sides that are parallel to each other. They are always parallel. That means they will never cross. And then the height is the part that makes that 90 degree is perpendicular to both of those heights. That's the biggest part with the trapezoid, is making sure that you are using the correct numbers in the right spot. And you have to make sure to use the parentheses around the addition, because order of operations, we want the addition to happen first, which means we need the parentheses. So let's go ahead and try it on a few different trapezoids here. So I'm going to start by writing out my formula. 1/2 times the height times base 1 plus base 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill in my information from there. I notice that these two sides are the ones that are parallel to each other, which means that those are my bases, which means the height is the one that is perpendicular to that, makes a 90-degree angle, which would be the 4. So in parentheses, between the two of them, it doesn't really matter which one is base 1 and which one is base 2, because you end up adding them together. Now, when I plug this into my calculator, I'm going to enter 1/2 or 0.5, whichever you prefer, times 4 times, and then I'm going to use the parentheses, 4.8 plus 2.5, put my end parenthesis on there to make sure my calculator does it all in the correct order, and then I end up with my answer. And again, we are taking meters multiplied by meters, which makes our label meters squared. If you would prefer to just type in the addition into your calculator first and then do all the multiplication, that's fine. But if you type it, the whole problem in at once, you have to include those parentheses. Let's try it again on another one here. This time I noticed that the trapezoid is just twisted on its side, but these two sides are the ones that are parallel to each other. So those are going to be my bases. And again, I'm always going to start by writing down which formula I am using and then plugging in my numbers from there. Now the height would be the side that makes a 90-degree angle to the two bases, so the 4. And then again, my bases are 6 plus 3. Make sure that you are always adding, don't multiply the bases. And then when I type this into my calculator, 1/2 times 4 times parentheses, 6 plus 3, close my parentheses, and I end up with an area of 18. And my label this time, centimeters squared. Okay, let's try one more here with our trapezoid. So area equals, write down my formula again. All right, so my bases, I see these two sides are parallel to each other. That means those are like base 1, and this one can be base 2. And then that means the one that's in between there making a 90-degree angle would be my height. So now we can plug in our numbers. 1/2 times 7 times, in parentheses, 12 plus 5. And then again, when I'm typing that into my calculator, I have to make sure to put parentheses around the 12 plus 5. And then I end up with an area 59.5 inches squared. So that is area of a trapezoid. Okay, last problem here. Ashley bought a triangular frame for a photo of her friends. The base of the frame is 8 inches. If the area of the frame is 24 inches, what is the height? Okay, so triangle, I'm going to start by writing down my formula. Area equals 1/2 times base times height. Now I'm going to plug in what I know. So this is saying the base of the height is 8. So in place of the B, I'm going to plug in an 8. And the area is 24. So in place of A for area, I'm going to write down 24. And now I have an equation that I have to solve that I'm trying to find the height. So to do that, I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to figure out this 1/2 times 8. Well, I know half of 8 is 4, so that's going to equal 4 times the height. And now I just have a one-step equation where I can do train tracks, divide both sides by the number that's with the variable, those cancel. H equals 24 divided by 4 is 6. So that means the frame, the height of the frame is 6 inches. That's it for area of triangles, parallelograms, and trapezoids. Make sure to have your notes in class.